Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets will officially kick off their season later tonight against the New Orleans Pelicans. We take a look at those injury concerns around Joe Harris and Seth Curry. What is the short and long-term impact for the Brooklyn Nets roster? And where are the expectations as we'll get a taste of the return of Zion Williamson and certainly a young and hungry team in the Pelicans? Where are the key matchups that Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and Ben Simmons can take advantage of? We'll break it all down next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there, you're going to find Doug Norrie, owner-operator of DFSR, for all your daily fantasy sports rankings from DraftKings to FanDuel. He's got you covered. I'm Adam Armbrecht, breaking down the New York Football Giants over on the One Giant podcast with my boy Andy Mack. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day, free on all those great platforms, and let you know today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. It is, of course, going to be the first-time users who are going to receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. And Doug! It's the kickoff of the 2022-2023 NBA season for the Brooklyn Nets, and gosh darn it, real basketball is upon us.
Yeah, man. For those that were waiting for Chris Mulholland here, we just had some scheduling issues. All my 100% my fault. So he's going to come on next week. We're already starting to work that out. No worries there. I'll take 100% of the blame on that one. Also, a quick show note: we're recording this prior to the opening slate of NBA action. So if anything ground shifting happened on Thursday evening and we don't discuss it here, it's because we wanted to make sure we got some hoops in ourselves and recorded before the game started. I don't even remember what you asked. This is good. We're going to get a note from the network here that this is not how you open the show.
Quick note from the channel coordinator: what exactly happened at the top?
We'll get a note. Yeah, Nick mentions coming in hot and heavy here on this opening. This is how many times can I screw up in a day? Go ahead.
No, the bottom line being, though, obviously, as the Brooklyn Nets will kick off the season against the Pelicans later tonight, let's even derail it a little bit further, Doug, because you and I have got one tasty opportunity coming in here as we double down together. We are now going to be sweating a bet all season long, which does have, it's relevant to the kickoff of this season here. Ben Simmons to lead the league in assist and Kyrie Irving to be your scoring leader for the season. Boy, separately, sure, you can get a little bit of coin, but you go ahead and smush those two parties together, and all of a sudden you're talking about a real baklava of entertainment.
Oh, there's a couple Honda Civics on the line here, so there's no, not fully loaded Honda Civics, but you're not going to be embarrassed about it. The windows, you're not going to be cranking the windows down with your hand. No, yeah, we'll get into that here a little bit. Let's start though, bury the lead a little bit with the injury stuff, right?
Yes,
something that we did not talk about. The other day, in thinking that we were going to do a little more of a preview here. Obviously, the bad news for the Nets going into the first game of the season. No Joe Harris, no Seth Curry as they work their way back from injury. Nothing, if not really disappointing to have this news. Neither sounds like it's a terrible situation. Curry is still ramping up. There was some video of him in practice the other day that looked like he was, moving pretty well. The Harris thing feels a little more precautionary than anything else with the foot soreness. But I will say, having been many seasons into the PTSD of Nets injury reporting, that you just can never feel good about starting off on the wrong, no pun intended, the wrong foot here. Because one, the Nets have just not been great as a team about this. That's just true. It's not even a hot take. The Nets have been really bad when it comes to injury timelines, or if not bad, they've just been fuzzy around injury timelines. And to lose or to not start the season with two guys that are sort of at the core around what you want to do as a team, which is space the floor. They're two of the four best three-point shooters by percentages over the last couple of years. To have them not start the season stinks. I don't really know another way to put it. They have enough guys to get past it, but One would be not great. Two is really not good. Like they really, really kind of need these guys for what they want to do on a high level for basketball purposes.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because you mentioned about, Joe Harris, well, coming off of the multiple surgeries in the offseason, he was away from the team obviously through the bulk of last year. So in a lot of ways, you not anticipate, but you mentioned it. You feel okay with the idea that he comes back out for a preseason game, some soreness there. There's a ramp up that you expect there. When it comes to Seth Curry, the fact that it was last year, he kind of gutted through it, and then they kept referring to it as like more of a maintenance thing that we had to take care of in the offseason. For him to still be working through it, it's good that you see the videos of him practicing because it at least makes you think this isn't going to take a long time for him to get out there to start the season. My bigger concern might be, not unlike Joe Harris last year, what happens if something gets aggravated here? Like, what happens if Seth Curry actually has a little bit more of a process that he needs to go through to get himself fully back to health? In theory, you look at this roster and you feel confident about having some of the other firepower that they've brought in, but we know that Edmund Sumner dealt with a little hip situation himself. So, like, some of the things that you feel like you've brought in to help safeguard against the injuries are obviously not, locks of the century entering the year. So, in a perfect world, they be healthy entering the season. I'm not sweating it at the moment. I am just probably mostly disappointed that we don't get the full boat. One of these guys in Joe Harris is a starter, at least to start the season. And the other guys, as key of a contributor you could possibly have. You just want to see the full roster get out there tonight.
And even if you had Royce O'Neal as the starter here, it's still losing Harris is still a loss. It's just still a loss. Just as a reminder, since 2020, among players who have taken more than 500 3-pointers in the league, and there's a lot, right? Harris was at 532. He's at 47%. That's the best in the league over that timeline, right? It's actually kind of way better than the next closest person. The next closest person is Luke Kennard. He's at under 45%. So he's a full, almost 2.5 percentage points better than at, 3-point shooting over the last couple of years. I know that, the sample size is a little smaller for him, but not really. I mean, talking 500 3-pointers. So it's Harris, then Kennard, then Desmond Bane, nice guy we wanted to draft, but was still with the Grizzlies. And then Seth Curry at 650 for a 43%. That's the top four in terms of 3-point shooting. These guys are just as elite as it comes. These are elite 3-point shooters. And it's the most important shot at the game, except for a dunk, right? Because by the percentage at which you shoot, your expected field goal percentage when you are this good at shooting threes is it's not a dunk, but it's getting close, right? Just because on the expected points. And I don't want to overstate it here. And I'm glad it doesn't seem like it's a long-term thing. I just don't want to undersell what it means to lose two of these guys and just how good they are at this particular shot, which just so happens to be, especially for players their size, the most important shot in the game.
Yeah, and you go back to and you just think about specifically just in this preseason sample size, which isn't everything, but it's what we have to go on with this new roster. Remember, it's a roster that against the Milwaukee Bucks shot 9 of 30 from beyond the arc. We understand that some of these things get skewed on the back ends of these games when you have the back end of the roster playing. But even the guys at the top of it, outside of a Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant knocking down some looks. Royce O'Neal struggled. Markieff Morris struggles from the corner when we talk about that game against the Minnesota Timberwolves as well. There is reasons to say, while guys on the roster, we always talk about the superstar bump. Well, if you're playing with, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and now Ben Simmons facilitating, you like to think that everybody goes from being a 35, 36, maybe to 38, maybe to 39. You dream on being a 40% 3-point shooter, but that's all in theory. And these guys are proven commodities that have been able to do it with or without superstar talent around them. That's why it matters so much. And it will be interesting here to maybe we talk about as we turn our attention a little bit to this particular matchup with the Pelicans coming up. How do they in the short term replace that shooting? How do they replace these rotations?
All right, we'll get into this. We'll preview this Pelicans game. We'll talk about just a few more, maybe just rest of season predictions as to kind of put a cap on what we talked about last week. First, going to tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Look, Prize Picks just figured this out. They figured out daily fantasy. They don't want you putting in salaries. They don't want you to try to make these line up. They want you to use player projections. They want you to go more or less. It's just that easy. It's just you up against the projections over and Prize Picks, and it's just very, very simple. It's, going over, more or less on the points, more or less on the assists, more or less on the rebounds. Each one of those things, you can combine them together to kind of get better odds. With daily fantasy Prize Picks, just figured out that the other way, first of these other operators, was just too difficult. Like, it was just too difficult. You're up against sharks in the water. You're not in that kind of state when it comes to Prize Picks. It's super simple. You pick 2 to 5 players. You just go whether or not they're going to score more or less than the Prize Picks projection, and you can win up to 10x your money on any entry. You're not competing against other people. It's just you versus those Prize Pick projections. They got every sport covered too. Obviously, you're focused on NBA, but maybe you want to go NFL, MLB while we roll through the postseason, NHL. That season's just gearing up. It's all there, plus a lot more on Prize Picks. Right now, you download the Prize Picks app, or you go to prizepicks.com. You sign up to start playing daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100, but you have to use the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. You can understand the math there. It's easy. Prize Picks wanted to make it easy, wanted to help you out as well. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy.
And of course, friends, you're over here and you are making the Brooklyn Nets and the Locked On Nets podcast, more importantly, the first listen of the day. Now you want to make your second listen game to game for the NBA, the Eastern Conference, the Western Conference, all the way into NCAA football and the leagues across the country that you want that deep dive coverage on. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA Eastern Conference and so much more with local analysis that only the Locked On Network can deliver. Follow Game to Game on the Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app or YouTube and wherever you get your podcast needs fulfilled. All right, Doug. You said, we did our prediction show coming into the season. There's even probably a few more things that we could scratch the surface of, but I almost find it interesting here in the absence of Seth Curry and the absence of Joe Harris. When I start to think about who can the Brooklyn Nets try to lean on here in order to maybe fill that gap a little bit, what is more likely to you, that the Nets play smaller in replacement of Joe Harris specifically? Obviously, Curry is smaller. Or do you think that they actually try to use some of the length and the size that they've brought in this offseason in players like Markieff Morris, Yuta Watanabe, understanding the hip impingement that was holding back Edmund Sumner? He's clear, so he should be out there and available. He feels like a very one-to-one filling the void of Seth Curry.
Yeah, I think we see pretty short rotations here to start the season. I think that they ramped up their guys enough in the preseason with how they played them that I think that they can not go crazy minutes on guys like KD, Kyrie, and Simmons, but they can go enough. Like we've heard, some of like the Warriors and some other teams saying they're going to take it easy to start the year. They have some other guys that are coming back from injuries. The Nets, I don't think, are finding themselves in that situation. And just because I think there's a lot of want to win these early games, right? Like there's a big motivation to start this season out correctly. So this all to say, I think we see pretty tight rotations from the big three. I think we see a lot of minutes out of Royce O'Neal. I think we actually probably have a matchup that Claxton can play a lot more in, right? With Zion and Jonas Valanciunas and guys like this. I think you can see a lot of Claxton here. And then after that, I think that they probably will just go a little bigger with, I think we could see a little more Markieff, maybe a little less Patty Mills. There's a few fewer places to hide Mills against the Pelicans than there is maybe someone a little longer. So that would be my guess. This isn't the preseason anymore. We're not going to get nominal minutes just to see how guys are. The Nets want to win this game. They have to start off with some momentum here to start the season. So I think we see, like when I was doing the minutes for the team, I didn't go much past like 9 guys here, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's correct. So that's kind of how I see it playing. I would trend bigger rather than smaller against New Orleans specifically, but I don't know if that necessarily means, I guess I mean longer, because I don't know if it necessarily means like a lot of minutes out of Sharp, though we could see it just to try to get some more rim protection with how Zion plays. So maybe we get a few minutes there, but I don't think it's going to be too nuts in terms of like way down deep on the bench. I think you're going to see, 8, maybe 9 guys, and that's going to be it.
Yeah, you have to just when we talk about the Pelicans, who, by the way, just looking across the way, they get full clearance for Zion Williamson returning back to the court here. Brendan Ingram, they're healthy and ready to go. I guess they have Hayes a little bit day to day for them is the only real one of note here. But when you think about inside their starting lineup, all the way up to Valanciunas, Valanciunas would be my reason for Day'Ron Sharpe to maybe get a little bit of run. Now, you have to then trust him on the outside potentially. You think you can switch and let Nicholas Claxton defend him when he's on the perimeter. Ben Simmons can go take on the outside assignment, but specifically in and around the basket, I'd like to use a little bit of Day'Ron Sharpe to bang bodies with Valanciunas and just try to punish him if he gets on the interior. But then go ahead.
And real quick about that. And Zion wants to get to the rim, man. And he's awesome at it. He's one of the best in the league at getting his body in toward the rim. He was ridiculous 2 seasons ago when he was healthy. Like the numbers are insane. He didn't really have to shoot 3-pointers just because he would just close everything at the rim and just made everything once he was there, right? Like he was 61% from the field. It was almost all at the rim. He got to the line a ton. Like he's just an impossible guy to really stop. He looked really good in the preseason when he played. And they just trend as a bigger team. Like effectively, Brandon Ingram's like playing the 2 on this team. Like they're going to start CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, Zion Williamson, Jonas Valanciunas. If you wanted a reason to not see a lot of Patty Mills, like this is what I'm saying. Like they're just going to have to trend a little bit bigger. This is a really, really big team. So yeah, I think you're right. Like I think we do see Sharpe for that reason. It's going to be really hard to get away with playing any smaller guy against this team.
No, 100%. And what's interesting too, so you mentioned about obviously Ingram playing down effectively at the 2, but then even when you go up the list here, and what's I think benefits, if we're talking about from a matchup standpoint, having Herbert Jones getting listed in there at the 3, but being 6'7", 206, this matchup in a lot of ways plays nicely into the length of Ben Simmons and his defensive value, the length of Nicholas Claxton, and then not having guys that on switches are somehow these mountains of a man that they can't go up against, right? Zion is a bull in a china shop, but he's also not enormous from a height standpoint. So you'd like to think that these guys are going to be able to switch effectively, stay in front of their matchups, whatever they may be, I don't see a lot of risk. You talked about this in the preseason, some of these games where maybe you get away from Day'Ron. You get to use what you think is probably the best version of your team in the absence of a couple of key players. I like the idea that the Nets can roll into this one feeling like they look across the board and go, oh, advantage us, and then just mitigating. I think the physicality is the biggest mitigation, which, by the way, whatever Markieff Morris' role is going to be, this arguably does feel like a game where you stick him out there to maybe be a little bit chippy on a Valanciunas, on a Zion Williamson, because that's what his role should be for this team.
Yeah, again, this is a big, strong team. They have guys that can bring off the bench who are, good role players. They're going to bring in Jose Alvarado. They can bring Trey Murphy off the bench. It's a good team. Like this is just, I talked about this a few weeks ago, that Larry Nance is off the bench. Like this is a quality squad.
Larry Nance is a good team, a good player.
And some of these guys, like Larry Nance, could start for a lot of teams, right? Like Trey Murphy would be a nominal starter for some lower level non-playoff teams. This is a very, very good team. So, and made all that much better by having, again, a guy who was like in the top 10 1 season ago in Zion in terms of just overall.
And then so coming up here in a second, let's take a look then at what could be maybe the most important part of this matchup. And it is some of the rotation players for the Pelicans, how the Brooklyn Nets match up. Take a look at the line. Where is this thing going? We're throwing a couple shekels on it, obviously, and even discuss that seismic Honda-size life-changing moment that Doug and I shared together earlier today. Okay, so you mentioned there before we celebrate our impending victory. You mentioned there this rotation for the New Orleans Pelicans. When you think about the second unit for them, does that look like something where when you look inside the Nets rotation, which I believe is the best that they've had in the Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving era? Do you look at the Larry Nance and the Trey Murphy Jr. as, in that pesky Jose Alvarado? I'm not saying that jokingly. The guy is a pest in the best possible way. Everybody wants that kind of player on their team, who's sprinting out of nowhere and stealing inbounds passes. Does that look like an advantage for them, where the Brooklyn Nets may look at this game and say, stem the tide when the stars are off, and then we come back in and we push you back down, right? Build the lead and sustain when they're off the court.
It's just why I thought you were just going to see more of a concentration around the core group of guys. Like the Pelicans can just probably go a little deeper here because the Nets don't have Harris and Curry. This would not be my line of thinking had those two guys been healthy. Like I wouldn't be saying this tune. There's just a pretty significant drop off at this point from those guys to other bench players that the Nets have. That would be the case for almost any team that lost guys of this quality, right? Like they're just losing two really, really, really good rotational pieces on the team. And whenever you lose those two guys, you don't just have this endless supply of them to come in and continue playing. So I think that is an advantage for the Pelicans. They are in slightly a same situation that the Nets are, which is it's a group that's kind of new to playing together. Like this group has not all played with Zion. CJ McCollum came in during the season last year. Larry Nance came in during the season last year. Like this is a group that didn't get tons and tons of preseason minutes. Ingram barely played in the preseason. So they're kind of feeling their way around too. So I think from that standpoint, both teams are equal, but the Pelicans are just a slightly healthier team. And I just don't want anyone to get confused. Like Zion's a superstar when he's playing, like for sure. Definite it's proven, math is solved on this one. So it's not even a hot take. He just is, he's amazing when it plays. So it's not like a huge concern. It's just the reality of the situation. And the Pelicans have done a really nice job building their team. Like they're going sort of in some ways like the new model of basketball, which is to say you don't need to get one of everything in terms of starting lineup. You just get 5 good players together and work on the idea that if you have 5 good players, they're going to play really well. Right. Yeah. Like I told you, like, is Brandon Ingram really the 2? No. Okay. Move Herb Jones to the 2. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. I don't think they even see it that way. It's just that they have 5 really good players and they have a good bench. And that's kind of has become the model for how you play modern basketball, which is don't use guys in terms of just don't use here's your point guard, here's your shooting guard. They just put 5 guys together that mostly fit together and you're going to be good. So that's all. That's all I mean.
Don't sacrifice talent for position, right? Don't get caught in this idea of I need a guy to fit the mold. I'll just take the 5 best players. That's the starting lineup. Next 3 best players, that fills out my rotation, right?
Zion Williamson played like point guard for them at times. Right. It was point Zion. It's not the way you think about point guard, but it's put the ball in his hands at the top of the key, have him bulldoze his way to the rim and see if you can stop it without fouling him over and over again. It's really, really difficult.
And interestingly enough, see, the only other thing that I'll point out here before we just talk a little about the line and some betting things, but when you talk about the second unit and Jose Alvarado and then even Devontae Graham, however they're going to end up, whatever their rotation is going to look like, right? That could be talking about getting down to your 8th and 9th guy, and they can run a little bit deeper. It's a sneaky chance, maybe. Whatever's going to happen with Patty Mills, and then whatever the upside of Cam Thomas is this year. If you feel like you are lacking for some 3-point shooting, if you're going to trend a little bit bigger, then again, you're not relying on, obviously, Nicholas Claxton, Day'Ron Sharpe to be knocking down the outside shot. Morris can certainly do it. You can go to Watanabe. I don't know if that's probably deeper than you expect to go in this game. I'm only mentioning to make the point of how deep do you go. But Patty Mills, at least you think on offense, you can put him out there and not get buried by size in the second unit potentially. 6'1", 6 foot backcourt there. So when those guys come in, if we want to talk about the coaching aspect of what we want to watch for coming into the season, it's like, here's a chess piece opportunity, right? Like Patty Mills going to get absolutely destroyed and called out on switches 9 days a week when he's on the defensive end. But for little burst, especially in lacking some of your 2 best 3-point shooters, maybe we can slip him in there and look for some of that quality perimeter looks that he's been able to do going back to last season and his career, frankly.
Yeah, look, in this iteration of the Nets, they're going to need him. If he plays at all, he's going to have to knock down his threes at over a 40% rate. Anything less than that, and he just doesn't really need to take the court. I'm not, saying that to be mean or anything like that. That's just the case. Like a player of his size, if he can't hit, and just the way he plays, if he can't hit threes at a 40% rate, they can sacrifice the lack of efficiency and just at least go for more size. Like that has to be a pretty much 1-to-1, which I think we will see this. I think we'll see as the season goes on, sort of the kind of same version that we talked about with Sharpe that he might be, or Day'Ron Sharpe that he might be situation dependent. Mills might be situation dependent. And the longer you are as a team, the less we're going to see Patty Mills. I think that's going to be just almost like a definite situation. And I spent a lot of time talking about the Pelicans. The Nets have Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons. It's not like they have nobody here, right? I'm not trying to just sit here and just do the, Locked On Pelicans podcast and talk about how great they are. It's just mostly because we talk about the Nets guys so much that it just warrants mentioning that the Nets match up totally fine with this team. The Nets have arguably they have more talent than this team. It's not that. I'm just trying to break down a little bit what fans might be expected to see here.
And as this is the kickoff to the season, right? Our first preview of the season, much like we're doing those lives over on YouTube for the post games, the same way. I think we want to try to do a little bit more of giving you a look at what the other team does well and what they bring to the table, as opposed to your point. I can always tell you Kevin Durant's phenomenal. And by the way, game to game, we're going to identify where those best matchups are. But it just makes sense, especially, I'll be honest, as an NBA fan too, Zion and Williamson getting back out on the court. Like, the Pelicans are going to be a fun team to watch this year. So it's interesting to think about how they put themselves together in the best possible capacity. Just from where was the line on this game?
Oh man, for a longest time, this was 5.5 for the Nets. They were -5.5. It's now down to -3 for the Nets. So they're still favorites. But it was just the line dropped like 2.5 points. I don't think it dropped solely on the Harris and Curry news. It might have come down a point off that, but I think it just as the season got closer and it was clear that Zion and Ingram were both going to play, I think that's more of what it was. It was always a little unclear about what their situation was going to be, how healthy they were. The second it was determined that they were fully healthy, I that's probably the point at which this game got a little closer. Nets are still favored, -3. So you have to like that. Obviously, books have had an incredibly difficult time with this team over the last couple of years, trying to figure out where the reality is, and I think bettors have as well. This season's probably going to be no different. Hit us with what our little parlay here, and then we'll get out of here.
Yes. So Doug was, we're having our conversations. He's going to put a little coin down on there. And he says, you know what, man? And we talked about this last episode. Ben Simmons, an opportunity to really see a big jump in his assist numbers. And gosh darn it, Doug followed that all the way to the bank. Lead the league in assists for Ben Simmons. Then we had also had the conversation about how good could maybe Kyrie Irving scoring. So I said, yes, I'll put down money on that bet, which was decent, right? Decent return. But if you know me, I like to jam stuff together to make it as dangerous and as exciting as possible. When we put those two together on a parlay, we just did modest bet, and we could be seeing a seismic, it was no joke when Doug mentioned it, Honda Civic size payout here at the end of the year. And the best part was I knew it was a good idea when I did it, because you immediately turned around and went, man, there's a direct correlation between Ben Simmons assists and Kyrie Irving scoring record, and then you came right in there with me. That's how I knew I made a right choice.
Yeah, look, we put it on all of them here. Like, it was Kyrie to lead the league in scoring, Kevin Durant to lead the league in scoring, yes, and Ben Simmons to lead the league in assists, right? But the fun thing about these bets here, specifically, is like you said, or we talked about off air, is that the Simmons correlation to the Kyrie or KD scoring title is like 1-to-1 correlated. It's not correlated in the odds, but if one happens, it's much more likely that the other is going to happen. Simmons is not going to take a lot of usage away from either of these two guys. Is it likely to happen? No. The plus 9,000 or whatever, or plus 90,000 or whatever it's at right now, is not saying that it's likely. I will say I do think the markets are wrong on this. Like, I think they probably underrated either one, like that they have to hit 58 games to be qualified, because that's what you have to do. And obviously no one has belief that any of these guys can play 58 games just based on the past. I do think some of that's context though. And I think there's many worlds where all three of these guys play more than 58 games, just because a lot of the stuff that happened with them was frankly not injury related. It was just other context related. So yes, they have to hit 58 games. But if they hit 58 games, it's almost for sure something's going really well with the team. And if something's going really well with the team, then these guys have all the other prerequisites to hit these numbers, to lead the league in scoring, especially if they're resting guys and one of them piles on at certain nights. So I do think these bets are really, really correlated together. Yes, they're long shots, but they're the exact, to me, they're the exact kind of long shot you take, because they're tied 1-to-1 together.
And honestly, the bump for Ben Simmons, I think he's like 5th or 6th or something to lead the league in assists, right? Something around there. Odds are similar though for Kyrie Irving on the scoring. And out of the The two, I would maybe understand, projecting for a bump for Simmons and assists. But the Kyrie Irving one, I think this is the league sleeping or forgetting how talented he is on the offensive end and what this can look like, because he is sixth or seventh down the list. And I understand there's just other players that, are just going to carry the load in a different way. And when you're on a team with Kevin Durant, it mitigates some of that scoring value. However, I don't hate, and again, long shot bets, but I don't hate the idea that Kyrie Irving looks as motivated as ever been. And it's never a bad thing when you're 4 years younger than your superstar teammate to be able to be the guy that maybe goes out there and cooks on a handful of extra nights.
Yeah, like that's all it is. There's just worlds. If you want to just play out different scenarios where these things can happen, it's easy to tell yourself a story with this one, and it's not a story that's completely crazy. And look, these exist in this sort of upper edge of the range of terms of odds.
Honda Civics, baby.
But I'm telling you, the odds are. I know for a fact the odds are wrong here. Like they're just not. They're incorporating too much other context in it that I believe has sort of gotten overblown. So that's mostly what I mean.
We are going to get out of here, obviously. Post game, this is official. We're going to try to do this a few times throughout the year. The Glue Guys, both hosts, joining us after the game for our usual live post game wrap up. Just wanted to be able to bring in some other guys that do great Nets coverage. We're going to try to connect with a few other hosts and other shows around the league for the opening night Brooklyn Nets. We're going to have Glue Guys, Locked On Nets, crossing it over. Really big fans of them. So join us over on YouTube. It's going to be a blast.
Yeah, subscribe to YouTube, like and subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast as well. That's the number one way to help the show. Totally free.
SBD, silent but deadly. Arnold Schwarzenegger from Last Action Hero, a little forgotten gem.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. We will be back again post-game tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.